Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you for taking time out of your agendas this afternoon to come to this presentation. I know you're all investing time today to learn something new about technology, about the way it's deployed. And I'm delighted to be here today with you. My name is Mark, and I represent Nutanix. So I'm going to be talking a little about how Nutanix thinks, a little about what we do and why we do it. And I'm also going to share a little of our vision for the future as to where we see things going with the particular area and field we're in. But to make it a little more interesting, it's not just going to be me, ladies and gentlemen. I am joined by one of our customers who, just to make it easy for you, is also called Mark. So it's very easy to remember our names this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And he is also from a product and a brand that I think many of you have heard of, and many of you probably have lurking in your garage somewhere, WD-40, that well-known fixer of many problems. So he'll be talking a little about the architecture and how they've deployed what they're doing. So my part of the presentation is going to be talking about what we term a journey to the cloud, a journey to the enterprise cloud. Now there's two words in this that some of you might struggle with. One is the word enterprise, because it means so many things to so many people, and the other is, of course, the word cloud. The enterprise is, of course, the IT environment that we operate in, and the cloud, well, hopefully that will become a bit clearer as we go forward and start to look at this. Now, for those of you who haven't heard of Nutanix, about 5,000 customers worldwide, founded in 2009, so relatively new to the scene. We went IPO last year, we're in over 100 countries, and we're listed on the NASDAQ, so you can find out more about us there. In terms of where we operate, it's across many verticals, many industries, many different environments, which many of you will be a part of, I'm sure. And we have examples there that we can share with you. But let's look a little bit about what it is that we've been trying to achieve for a while now. Well, I said I wanted to share a little about how we think. Has anybody ever come across a guy called Nassim Taleb? He wrote a book, a couple of hands up at the back there, well done. He wrote a book called Anti-Fragile. And he talks about this concept of something called anti-fragility. Now, what that basically, if ever you want to buy a book and you're interested in reading, Nassim Taleb, Anti-Fragile, look it up, it's worth a read. And if you don't read the whole book, at least read the first 60 pages or so. What it actually talks about is that we so often, when we have setbacks or we're disturbed or things go wrong, resilience is often what we look to be. We look to be resilient, which takes us back to where we were. But in the book, he talks about anti-fragile, which takes us from a place of disadvantage to learn from the experience and embrace it and then move forward much further. And that's very much a notion of the CEO and the people of the company, of what they've been trying to do with this particular organization in terms of how we think about IT. So today, the cloud has set many expectations for many of you, and we've actually deployed that and we've understood it. In fact, the very notion of cloud has actually started to help us to almost use the phrase from a CIO to a CAO, maybe a Chief Amazon Officer, somebody who is responsible for cloud. Private cloud is something which we own and we manage, and public cloud is something that other people will own somewhere else. But what we've actually noticed is that there are reasons why we want to use both. It's not all going to go into the cloud, and it's not all going to go into the private data center, because there's a need for both. And there are going to be times when we have elastic workloads, things that are going to be flexible, and we don't know what they're going to be. That's where the public cloud, the economics of the public cloud, will work well for us. But when it comes to predictable workloads, the private cloud can be a better place. You wouldn't, for example, live in a hotel. Why? Because the cost would just be astronomical over a long period of time. But if you were going to live somewhere for a long period, you would buy a house. And those are kind of two extreme scenarios of what we're talking about there. So what Nutanix, very briefly, has been looking to do is trying to embrace the economics and the flexibility of the public cloud that we're all familiar with now, so I don't need to do a talk on that, but bring that into the private environment. But here's where the difference is. There are so many vendors and so many conversations that talk about private cloud. That can be from anything from running your own data center of servers, storage, virtualization, security, networking, and all of those elements. But each of those is not a cloud. Each of those needs skills, time, effort, energy, and money to actually implement and manage and oversee. The complexity is huge, whereas the cloud, you just deploy the infrastructure that you need. So what we've tried to do, and what we've been successfully doing with over 5,000 customers worldwide, is to actually deploy something which started, that was called hyperconverged, in our Nutanix box, but we've evolved it to become a very Amazon-like experience. Now let me just try now to explain a little of what that looks like and why, and then we'll hear from WD-40. We've got some interesting tales to tell as to how they've deployed it and what they've done with that particular environment. So first of all, I'm going to start with, you've probably heard the term hyperconverged. I'm sure most of the people have here. It was a concept we coined, and we're very proud of that, hyperconverged infrastructure. And to all intents and purposes, it was about compute and storage coming together so that the management and the aspects of that are actually easily integrated. So does that equal cloud? Well, no, because there's more to it than that. That's why it talks about a journey to the enterprise. We've got networking. What about if we could now start to, in that hyperconverged model, start to talk about compute, storage, and networking? What else is there? Well, there's virtualization. I want to make sure that virtualization is integrated. There's a difference between running a virtualization environment and having a compute and storage environment. They look close together, but you've still got different systems to manage, different skill sets, and different qualities to actually get through. What about security? We look at security in terms of how we make the environment more secure and how we can actually manage that. What if you have legacy applications? Applications that have been old and are not quite as new as some of the ones you're deploying. We have containers that can be built into that. You've got application mobility, there's one-click automation, and then we've got machine intelligence. Now, I don't have as much time as I'd like to explain, but let me just phrase everything I've just shared with you. Imagine if that was all integrated. What could we do with that? Go back to Amazon. I want to use that as an example. There are a couple of things that Amazon have done which have been great demonstrators for us. You probably are aware of Amazon as a cloud, but what about their one-click purchase? Who buys stuff from Amazon? Probably most of us, yeah. They've developed a system where on one click you can purchase an item. They've transported that one click into a cloud type technology, so you have one click that can deploy your cloud infrastructure. What if you could do that in your private cloud? So all your virtualization, all your security, all your storage, all your server infrastructure, all of that was done through one click deployment. And what about upgrades? What if you could do upgrades in office hours with one click? There is more complexity behind that. There is more anti-fragile thinking behind that than I have time to explain. But in simplistic terms, that is what we're trying to achieve. Now, what I'm going to do for the next part of the presentation, I'm going to hand over and introduce Mark. He's going to talk through what WD-40, and then at the end, I'm going to come on just with a few pointers to try and just wrap this up. This really is a whistle-wind tour, but thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, well, can I ask you to put your hands together? He's a customer, not a presenter, for Mark Breed from WD-40. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you. Oh, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Mark. I'm just going to take a few minutes to just go through a very top-level view of how our Nutanix journey began, what were the drivers behind that, and how we got to where we are today. So just as a quick drop-in intro, if the clicker works. So a little bit about the company. I'm not going to go for every point, but that lovely pop quiz question, what does WD-40 stand for? Anybody know? Nutanix guys know, that's a good start. They know their customer, that's brilliant. So it stands for water displacement, that's the WD part, and the 40 stands for 40th attempt. So our chemists back in the 50s, they were trying to do things for rockets, and it took them 40 attempts to perfect their formula. And our brand has since evolved over a number of years. We're a global brand, we've got 450 employees worldwide, but when we talk about myself and my team and our Nutanix deployment, it's actually the EMEA region that we work for and I represent, and my team as well. And that's where we've deployed Nutanix. So in terms of my team, I'm an IT services manager. I have a team of 7. our team is essentially split into two. We are half infrastructure and half support. And we support, of those 450 users globally, the EMEA region takes up about 225 of those people. Predominantly, what kind of IT technology do we run? Well, we're predominantly a Microsoft house. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, we were one of those couple of customers that did buy DPM as a backup and disaster recovery strategy. I'm pleased to report we're no longer one of those customers. But how did Nutanix and this hyper-converged infrastructure thought come into WD-40, and what drove us to have a look into this technology? Well, the problem we had, we're already on a virtualized journey, but we were starting to run out of space. We have a very small data center room in our Milton Keynes head office. Our networks were still evolving. We were running out of both physical and virtual space. We are a Hyper-V kind of hypervisor customer, and we had a new ERP system that was on the horizon as well. My manager and his team were looking to evolve that, and so we needed to find a solution to find some performing infrastructure that was going to quite adequately look after that project and be able to run an ERP system on successfully. We already had traditional SAN infrastructure. That infrastructure was coming for end of life. We were finding it quite complex to manage, quite complicated to update, and we'd kind of inherited over a long period of time from evolving IT members and teams, because we're a fairly youngish team, lots of the thought process that for every application in the business, we would dedicate a server towards, a high-performing server that we would utilize maybe 10% of. And that was a thought process, sort of myself and my team and our systems admin, Jeff, who's obviously over in the corner there, whom some people may have seen at .next. We needed to kind of change that thought process. So what solutions are available to us? Well, we could have just stayed as we are. We had the space constraint, but we could have somehow done a migration, reinvested in a new SAN technology, deployed server storage and networking, and scaled up. It's tried and tested. It's relatively well known in our business, but for us, space was an issue, and that equals more power, more cooling overhead that we were mainly concerned about, and myself as an IT manager was concerned about. So what about this term hyperconvergence? Well, our systems admin, he'd come from previous companies, they'd dipped into this new world back then a few years ago, this evolving new technology of hyperconvergence, well, where we can take networking, we can take storage, we can take computing and put it all into one simple unit device. Okay, that sounds quite interesting. All right, well, so we kind of set about a little journey and to go and have a look at varying different vendors. And I'll talk about why we chose Nutanix in a second. But for us, we had standard advantages. I'll delve into a few more in more granular detail in a second. But for us, a couple of them for us was footprint. Obviously, I've spoken about space. We have also management. Now, management is very key, and I'll hook back to some of the things that Mark said a moment ago on the management side. And we hook into power saving and resiliency and that kind of things. But the real key for us is more on the risk side, is how do I sell this new evolving technology that we're kind of very young and immature about in our team, this new, how do I sell that to my directors, my stakeholders? How do I get this new technology in and instill confidence in a new technology that nobody's really much sort of idea about in our business, and how do I get that buy-in from them? How do I get that capital expenditure sign-off on a significant investment? And for why, we'll see in a second on the next slide. But it's also cost, performance, that are also some of the unknowns and some of the risks. You're sold and you're hyped up on, the performance is equal, it's better, it's amazing, but actually you're not going to know that until the proof is in the pudding. So how do we get there? So why Nutanix for us? As I mentioned before, we are a Hyper-V customer. So at the time, Nutanix was fully compatible and approved for running Microsoft Hyper-V. Fantastic, a nice, easy migration from our existing platform across to the Nutanix. Mentioned a minute ago about management. Management is a key point. With Nutanix, they have this like central pane of glass, this management console where you can see how the health of the device, you can see how it's running, the performance, what's utilizing more processing power, etc. You can see the configuration, you can upgrade. And and developing on that, Mark alluded to this Amazon thought process of this this one-click shopping, and how Nutanix tries to bring that to an upgrade process. And for us, that is quite a key thing. We can now, or our systems admin can now go into the Nutanix device, and if we want to upgrade a node, we can select that node, click upgrade. It migrates all the virtual machines that are on that node out of the way, does the upgrade, moves them back seamlessly, and the key thing is it's in business hours. So I am no longer paying Jeff overtime to do these upgrades out of hours over the weekend, which is fantastic. But it just echoes that thought process, and it's of that kind of Amazon sort of ethos, as it were, which is a great unique selling point, is that we can maintain and keep this kit running during the day and keep it up to date as much as we can. For us, another key thing when you're trying to sell something like Nutanix, a new technology to our stakeholders is, well, what about support? Support is a key thing. We'd love to go off and buy a technology and it'd be absolutely seamless from start to finish and we never have any issues with it. The reality is something goes wrong. A hardware piece fails, a hard drive fails, etc. So what about support? Well, as part of the requirements gathering and the work we did with Nutanix and the account management that we had, we set up a kind of a dummy support call. We utilized their support team ahead of making an investment and actually tested their knowledge, tested how quickly would they have resolved the problem, what steps would they go through, and it was very, very good and reassuring. And just finally on the back of that, I'm quite a bit of a stickler for a Gartner Magic Quadrant. Some people are, some people aren't. But for us, if you have someone like Nutanix who are a leader in what they do, it is our business kind of hooks into it quite a lot. So if I'm selling that back and say, actually, this provider is actually, they're a leader in this hyperconvergent stuff. They are kind of the best of the area that they do at the particular moment. So utilizing that to kind of sell this into the business is actually very helpful. I've only briefly touched on our whole Nutanix journey. There's a lot more that I can talk about and a lot more of how we use it, what we'd use it for, how we deploy it and stuff, but there isn't enough time for me to kind of talk into that. But if anybody does have any questions or want to follow up or anything with me, I will be at the Nutanix stand for a few minutes afterwards if anybody wants to have a conversation around sort of how we do it or find out anything further. But that kind of sums it up for me very briefly. I'm going to hang back to Mark now, who's going to hopefully finish off and go from there.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Please, round of applause for Mark. Just to reiterate, we haven't paid Mark bucket loads of money to be here today. He's genuinely passionate about the deployment, and we think that the end users here that are serious and are actually evaluating technology will find hearing from one of your peers more useful than just hearing a vendor tell you how wonderful we are. Because we aren't biased, of course, but it's just always good to hear that. And there is a lot of passion there. What I want to do now is, just in the kind of final 9 minutes or so, is just talk you through a little bit of where we're heading and just kind of some of the other points that just might help you just understand a little more. And the idea is to do nothing more than just open your hearts and minds to some thoughts and ideas. Some of you probably saw on the way in, we have a stand at the end of this aisle here. It's just near the entrance. We've got systems engineers, we've got demo pods, and we have a number of people that are there ready to book meetings or actually engage with you in discussion. So do feel free to pop down if you have more questions afterwards. So in summary, what we've talked about now is this. Basically, it's where we are today, 2017. We wanted to build this Amazon inside, which is kind of the Amazon-like experience. Forgive me for using Amazon if you are a Microsoft Azure user or you're some other cloud environment, but it's just that inside, the one click, whether you're upgrading, deploying, expanding, it's that kind of simplicity. And that's what we want to do. And then, of course, this hasn't come out so well as we did saw it on the slides earlier, but converging compute, storage, virtualization, network, and security, the kind of building block. So this is pretty futuristic. People want to tell you the roadmap and where we're going, what's next. This is actually quite smart in terms of what we've achieved and where we are today. but I am going to give you a little bit of the vision of where this is heading next. And so what we're looking to build is, and this is coming out terribly, sorry about this, it was okay on the PC earlier, invisible click. So the Amazon Invisible. Now what does Amazon Invisible mean? So we've said at the beginning, and some of you will agree, you will be working on the hybrid environment. You will be working on private cloud, and you will have public cloud. Now the public cloud is fairly simple today. The private cloud has not been simple, but that's what we've tried to do with the green line, is make the private cloud simple. What if you could simplify the convergence between the private and the public, so you have a one-click hybrid? So for your predictable workloads, it will deploy on your private cloud. For your unpredictable workloads, the short-term loan, whatever, you can deploy on the public cloud, or whatever your scenario is, and you can do that with a very simple click. So what's going on behind the scenes is very complex, but what's going on as far as you're concerned is much simpler. Now why is that good? Because then you can spend more time focusing on delivering business value than just simply keeping the IT going. The downside is Jeff now gets less overtime, as Mark alluded to earlier, because the upgrades don't need to happen out of hours. But the good news is he gets more time to tinker around with his cars, which I understand is one of his hobbies. So where is this deployable? I've spoken to some people here, and I've spoken to some people on the stand, and they see us as oh, you're the VDI guys, right? Yeah, we do VDI. Actually, disaster data protection, that's the kind of thing that I'm really looking to attain to. Or maybe there's some sort of hybrid cloud thing that I want to do here. Well, there are many platforms and there are many environments that we will actually be working with each of you on. And some of you will start with one of these, but then you'll start to see it expand as you start to deploy, not just the utilization, but the actual different environments that you'll be able to deploy within a Nutanix environment, which does scale, obviously, quite extensively. So that's the vendor telling you. You've had a customer telling you. What we then wanted to do is we wanted to give you another viewpoint, which is the analysts. Now, we paid for a report for IDC. I'm not going to hide that because that's what IDC do. But if anyone knows IDC, there are some analysts that are completely independent, truly verifiable about what they do. If the results were rubbish, I wouldn't be showing you this slide. But I'm very pleased, ladies and gentlemen, that the results were very good, as we had thought. So you can see here that the business value, we're looking about 510% over a 5-year return on investment. A payback period, this is on average, this isn't specific. Some were much less, some were a bit longer. It depended on what you were doing. A payback period of about 7.5 months from deployment to actually getting the return. And of course, we can see a 5-year total cost of ownership saving. So that's the kind of the business value. That's the selling it back into IT. What we have on the bottom line here is we have key performance improvements, 85% faster, 71% less time, unplanned downtime. These figures are not necessarily going to be where you are. You may be far better than these. You may be not quite as good. But on average, these are the figures that have been verified by analysts who have spoken to a number of customers. And these are global. And in fact, we're just updating this report again right now. As I stand here, there are a number of interviews, a number of discussions going on. So in the next month or so, there'll be an updated report because things have improved even since these results have actually come out. Now, Mark alluded to this. And in the meetings that I've had with customers, the one question that often comes up is support. Support, support, support. That's the one thing that people really want to know about. We have invested very heavily in the best that we can get. We've got the best systems in place, the processes in place that we're particularly proud of. There's a lot of experience. And just even for a startup company, 24/7/365, follow the sun support. We've got people, the local centre to here is Amsterdam. But if you're up at 3 a.m. because there's a problem or an issue or something like that, because things do go wrong, let's face the real world, then we have people actually globally supporting you. And although I didn't show the slide, there's a Net Promoter Score. If you don't know what that is, that's fine. But for those who do know what the Net Promoter Score is, it was 92, which is way and above the industry average, which is about actually half of that. If you're interested in that kind of thing, then we're very happy to show and demonstrate that with you at some point, even after this session. So that's it from me. That's all from Mark. We are on the stand N314, which is basically if you come out here, just go straight to the end, you can't miss it. If there's anybody here from the public sector, we have a session going on just around the corner. which is going to be talking about Nutanix in the public sector very specifically immediately after this. And if anybody wants an Amazon Echo, drop your business card off and we'll pick one up. We'll pick your card up and we'll probably help some winners win one. But the important thing is we have the demos there, we have systems engineers to answer technical questions, and if anybody wants to meet with us off-site because you haven't got time today, we can book meetings today and come and meet you at your premises in your time that suits you. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your attention. I know it's a long day, there's a lot to absorb. I hope that's at least given you some insight. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to meeting you in due course. Thank you.